Hey, Messengers listeners, Chris Searles here. On today's episode, we are talking about bringing relationships back to your business, why that's important, and why it doesn't pay to be an asshole. All right, welcome everybody to the Messengers podcast. I am Chris Searles. With me today is Rob Seifert, the creative director here at Searles Graphics. Today's topic, we are talking about relationships and how we've kind of seen them devolve, I guess, a little bit in the business world over the past decade or two. And you know, we've noticed a change, certainly in the way that by default that I guess we get treated sometimes as a vendor.
Right. Yeah.
By some people that kind of call you and treat you as though it's you should be privileged that they even decided to make the call and consider you as a vendor for their business.
Yeah.
And it's really notable and noticeable from some people who they're just starting their business. It's
Right. Yeah. It's really something that, we here have really had to wrap our heads around because, we've been in business a very long time and built this business on good relationships with our clients. And that's really what it's all about for us. And when we have, people calling that have that type of attitude that, they're just calling to get the best price on a product, it's kind of I find it insulting, honestly. And, I understand it, but I feel that I have to, there's an explanation involved in what we try to do with people.
Well, it's certainly not the best way to start a relationship off by treating somebody like they should be ecstatic over the fact that you just decided to have a conversation with them.
Right.
I think that's what gets me most often when we deal with this. And obviously we're talking about certain instances. This is not a blanket statement. It doesn't apply across the board. But I've certainly noticed it happening a little more frequently lately than it used to.
Sure.
And again, it tends to be, I think, most of the time somebody that's starting a business and is assuming that their business is going to be the next Microsoft, not that it's necessarily a software business, but they're about to build this huge business and you're going to be really lucky to get their work, so you better bend over backwards right away right now and do everything that you can do for me to earn my business.
Right.
And the reality is 99% of the time it ends up being a project that never even happens, or a business that disappears within the first 6 months or year, or But
I used to relate it to the person or the individual, but really, as you're saying, it's more of a trend. And I think it just has to do with the way that a lot of these things are happening over the internet without personal communication, and that's it's just transferring over to people's behaviors and attitudes in terms of finding someone that can provide a service. Hey, there's the whole internet out there now, so I'm just going to call and try to get the best price on whatever I can. And there are certain businesses that deal in a lot more than price, and that has to be evaluated. Used to just be evaluated by businesses, but I think individuals have to understand that now too.
And I think more. It's not even just a price thing. It's I think you're absolutely right, and you hit the nail on the head where we have a generation of people that grew up and are growing up not needing to deal with people. Where you look at, I would say kind of my generation was the first that I guess kind of started getting to that point where being able to purchase things online and not have to actually deal with a salesperson or go to a store and interact with people and it really, I didn't grow up that way. I mean, the e-commerce didn't really become anywhere near what it is now until I was probably in college. But you have a generation of people and maybe multiple generations of people now that grew up not needing to interact with other human beings when it came to making a purchase and buying something. And like you said, it's price and and some reviews and things like that, and that's all that they would go off of to make a buying decision. And then you get into the business world where B2B transactions aren't as aren't as prevalent over just on the internet, when you actually have to deal with a real person and
Right.
and work with vendors and that attitude tends to then just kind of translate and moves forward to the way that people deal with people rather than just evaluating buying decisions online at their leisure.
Right, right. And I mean, I look at it from my perspective, and any client I deal with, new or old, existing, I mean, it, and it might seem kind of silly, but it's really very personal to me. The service that I provide, and and the way that I deal with these people. Always try to be as honest as I can in every aspect of what we do, and what I do for them, and and it's because of that I expect that back,
Mm-hmm.
and I know I can't realistically, but I mean that's
Well, and we treat our vendors that way,
right,
right?
yeah,
I mean, we certainly have people that walk in through the door all the time. Oh, I can beat your price on this. I can beat your price on that. I can beat your price on this. And well, yeah, but you know what? 5 years ago, when we really, really needed something from the person that we buy that from, they were there and they took care of us and they handled it, and that's worth something. And so we're not just jumping ship from somebody that's treated us well for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years,
yeah,
just because you're going to walk through the door and tell me you can save me a couple dollars. I mean, that's not the way that we treat our relationships with our vendors either.
sure,
And I think I saw it recently. Mark Cuban had a quote that he put out there, which was something like, one of the most underrated skills in business right now is being nice. And I think that's what a lot of people fail to realize is when, as a buyer, as a consumer, they see themselves as well, I'm buying something from you, you're getting my money, so you owe me everything.
yeah,
And what they don't realize, especially when it comes to B2B transactions and running a business, is there comes a time in every business when you're going to need something from a vendor, whether it's better payment terms or your customers aren't paying you this month as fast as they typically do, and so you need to go an extra week or 15 days or something like that on bills that you owe to your vendors. Are they going to help you out with that or not? And there comes a time when, if you're always the squeaky wheel and you're always the
right.
the one that's treating somebody that way, when you need that, they're not going to be there for you because there's no reason for them to be there for you. You've not been there for them.
Right, right. Yeah, no, that's something we deal with. I mean, that's a great point because I think right away towards our policy of rush jobs, we never charge a rush fee. It's always based on our production capabilities and what we can do in-house. So if a client calls and they say, whether they're new or an old client and they need something right away, we're going to do everything we can do to get it to them for their deadline and get it out the door as quick as we can based on, our current production flow. And we're honest about that too, and we'll work overtime and weekends to help them make that deadline. But if you're dealing with a client that sometimes does work with you and sometimes doesn't, the time you get the call is when they need the rush.
Right.
And they're ordering their other jobs online, and they're realizing that if they're going to get a rush from a company that does their online printing, they're going to have to pay a lot more money for it now. But
or it's not going to be an option because by the time it gets shipped and there's
they
just
can't
no
make
way.
the deadline.
Right.
It's impossible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think that's the other aspect of that too is what I don't think people who act a certain way when it comes to dealing with their vendors don't realize that they're generally speaking is always an asshole tax. You know, it's got to be worth our while to do business with you. And if you're always going to be difficult and you're always going to, you know, if that's the way that you operate and that's the way that you act, I can't charge you the same that I charge somebody else. And whether that means, you know, or I can't do the things for you that I do for somebody else, because at some point there's got to be a value put on what my staff has to deal with when they deal with you, right?
it involves more effort.
If it makes their lives difficult to deal with you, then we need to get something out of that, because otherwise it's not worth it to make our staff miserable just because we want to keep you as a client because there's some money involved in it, or to make myself miserable because every time you call I'm cringing that you know, this person's on the phone and I don't want to have to deal with them, and you know, and there's a certain part at which it's, you know, a point at which it's just not worth that. And so if you are that, but you're still getting service, it's important to understand that you're most likely paying for that at some point, whether you know it or not, or think it or not.
I've seen it occur here, you know, not very often because we do have a lot of patients. But years ago, your dad said, you know, this client is literally an asshole, and I thought that was pretty funny because that's his pet peeve: people misusing the word literally. So I explained to him that that's pretty impossible, that the client was literally an asshole. But he charged them a delivery fee that he normally probably wouldn't have charged them because we were going on delivery in that direction in any case. But that was why, because the client was very problematic in terms of things, and we had made several efforts to appease them at no charge, and finally it just became so cumbersome that, you know, a fee had to be applied, an asshole tax. So.
And at some point it's pay it or don't, and if you go somewhere else, go somewhere else.
Right.
Because it's either it's going to be worth it for us to deal with you, or it's not. So, you know, and if it's not, then please find another vendor.
Yeah, well, that's the other.
You know, we talked about that. We had a whole episode about that,
Right.
right? About the importance of being able to say no.
To walk away,
And
right?
and when, you know, when it becomes just not worth it anymore to deal with certain people or have certain customers.
Right.
You know, and certainly there are, you know, like you said, I mean, we will bend over backwards for every one of our clients,
Right. But
until you prove yourself not worthy of bending over backwards for.
right.
You know?
You
And
gotta
then
know when you're in a bad marriage, right?
yeah,
That's
and then
it.
at that point, you know, it's nobody else's fault but yours for the way that you treated other people, that they're not going to be willing. I mean, it's like, you know, you wouldn't go into your personal relationships that way and expect that you're going to have a group of friends that you can treat poorly, and then all of a sudden, as soon
Right.
as you need something from them, that they're going to be there for you. It's just not going to work that way.
Yeah.
And I think people fail to take that human element
Yeah.
into their business relationships.
Yeah, it's that
a lot.
reciprocation of courtesy that's really appreciated. This morning I got an email back from a new client that we did a quote for on a pretty decent-sized project, and he got back to me about it, even though we weren't getting the job, just to explain that the costs in the job as compared to other vendors were only a few dollars more, but overall the job was outside of their budget, and they were going to do the job digitally without printing this journal. But the fact that he got back to me and explained that to me was really appreciated, because we went through, you know, it was an involved quote, and we spent some time on it. So,
Well, and that's important too, right? Because there are some people now that'll contact me and say, hey, you know, we want to do this. Can you quote it? And I'll just flat out say no, because it's been 3 times over the past year you've asked me to quote jobs for you. I've done it. and I follow up and I follow up and I follow up and literally don't hear a word from you, never hear whether or not you even did the job, if you did it with somebody else or whatever. And at some point, either you're using me as just because you need to get a certain number of quotes and so I'm not going to put in time to do that for you, or you're just that bad of a communicator, or you don't value and respect my time enough for me to really care to keep doing that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, that's something we evaluate too. We try to evaluate the job when it comes in, whether we feel it's in the ballpark of something we do here. If it is, we're going to do the quote regardless of whether we think we're going to get it or not. And we'll do that 2, 3, 4 times. And if we don't get them, then we have try to have an honest conversation with the client about what we're going through in order to provide them with these quotes, and whether we really have a shot at ever getting the job. And that's like I said, 3 or 4 times after not getting a job with somebody, that's the question that's posed. And really, it's just an honest question. And about 50% of the time, I'll get an answer. I'll just shoot out an email and ask if price was the only consideration in their decision, and I'll ask how far off we were so that we can make sure we're in line with our quoting, because there are a lot of variables with the job, and we want to make sure we're in the ballpark with other vendors and other people in the area that are offering the same services. So just to find out. So an answer to a question like that is truly appreciated,
Yeah. I mean, it goes a long way for sure. I mean, there's, I think it comes down to an understanding of the human element of business. You're dealing with another person, right? Whether it's you purchasing something on behalf of your company from another company, you're still, there's a P behind or a C behind every B, right? So every business, even a B2B transaction, is still just 2 people having a conversation and talking, coming to an agreement. So, that's something that I think is important for people to remember, that you're dealing with a person, you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with, people that are just trying to make a living, that are trying to, make a reasonable profit on what they offer. I mean, ideally, that's the kind of person that you're dealing with. But, going into it with that attitude that, I'm making a call, I'm not calling some giant corporation, some faceless corporation that doesn't care about me. And so I'm just going to negotiate the best price and whatever. You're dealing with a person who has a job to do, and they have people that they have to report to and answer to. And, and remembering that human element in the way that you approach those conversations and the way that you handle business, aspects of your business, I think is like Mark Cuban says, one of the most underrated qualities in people these days.
Right.